There's a Hasidic parable which tells of a king who had a terrible argument with his son. It doesn't tell us what they were arguing about, and so I guess it doesn't really matter. But it tells of a king who had this terrible argument with his son, and in a fit of rage, the king exiles his son from the kingdom. And years pass, and the son wandered alone throughout the world. But over time, the king's heart softened, we are told. And he has sent his ministers to find his son and to ask him to return. When they located the young man, he answered them that he could not return to the kingdom. He had been too hurt, and his heart still harbored bitterness. The ministers traveled back to the king and brought the sad news to him. And the king told them to take his son the following message. He said, "Return as far as you can, and I will come the rest of the way to meet you." The king's heart softened because he gave up the possibility of a changed past. The king's heart softened because he was willing to do something differently today. The king's heart softened, and he moved in the direction of his son. Where in your life do you need to soften your heart? To let go of the possibility of changing what has been and take a step forward today in the direction of someone else? What can you do today that will help you give up the possibility of a changed past? Maybe you need to grieve, to talk about what happened to you to someone who will listen. Maybe you need to reach out to someone. I have often counseled those struggling with forgiveness when it feels like reaching out to someone is absolutely impossible. I've often counseled those struggling with forgiveness to write a letter that they have absolutely no intent of sending to the person that they need to forgive. Other times, that letter might need to be addressed to a younger self, forgiving them for making the choices that they made at an earlier time in their life. You might just try this and see if it helps you to move easier with the resistance in your world. Now, my suggestion is that you handwrite this letter so that there's no accidental, whoops, I sent it. And so that you can be really present with the words that you choose and use all the F words that you need to in order to get it out. I suggest that it include all the ways that you've been hurt, the ways in which your life has been changed, all the things that you feel that you've missed out on because of this event, and all the things that you've missed out on because you've been holding on to it for so long. And then tuck it away so that you can go back to it and see how far that you've come years from now. Or if that doesn't sound good, set it on fire and imagine your heart softening as the smoke is sent like a prayer to the heavens. We are taught that we must forgive over the course of our lives, not 7 times, but 7 times 70 times. Jesus didn't mean whatever 7 times 70 is, by the way. He meant that we must forgive more times than we ever thought possible. Just when you think you're tired of forgiving one last time, and then another, and another. We must forgive even when we think we're done, again and again, even when our world has crumbled around us, forgiving ourselves, our family, our friends, even forgiving God for what we have been through. Why? Because there's no possibility of a changed past. And holding on makes us more rigid and less flexible. Holding on makes us less capable of dealing with the next conflict or the next difficulty, which inevitably will come. So why must we forgive over and over and over again? I love saying this, and there's something about saying this with a stole and a robe on that makes me feel very empowered. But let me say it to all of you again, because it feels so good. Life is not fair. It's not. And people who wore robes and stoles when I was a child in my life told me that it was. Life is not fair. And clinging to the idea that something wasn't fair in your past doesn't change it. So we have to forgive over and over again because forgiveness is the source of strength. And we need that strength in our lives at the places where we have faults, right? Where fault lines exist. Where we've made mistakes ourselves even and have maybe wronged another. We need forgiveness in our lives when we've been wronged, when we blame someone else for our circumstances or the pain that we're experiencing. When we say, it's your fault, there's a fault line. When we draw lines between ourselves and someone else saying, you never, or you always. Someone once pointed out to me, if you point your finger at me. If you point your finger, how many fingers are pointing back at you? 3. We need forgiveness because life is not fair and people are fallible and inconsistent. Forgiveness gives us the strength we need to survive, to move with the inevitable resistance in our lives. Forgiveness allows us to live better today because it's giving up that possibility of a better past, right? Forgiveness gives us strength. And the king said, remember, return as far as you can, and I will come the rest of the way to meet you. Where in your life are there places that you might be made stronger by softening your heart and letting go of the idea of a changed past? Did someone die unexpectedly? The work may be to forgive them, even though they're gone, or to forgive God. To forgive God. Maybe you need to forgive God. Maybe, in fact, you might need to pay attention where you have fault lines between you and your relationship with God. Spend some time in prayer about where you feel wronged. Or maybe you're one of those people who use that F word that we don't say in church when it comes to thinking about your relationship with God. I know you're out there in the pews. My relationship with God, I want to tell you, became much better when I realized that I could shake my fist at him and use whatever pronoun I wanted to and get angry and work on forgiveness both of myself and of him. So just like your relationship with people, you also, in fact, have a history with God that cannot be changed. Are you clinging to that history with God? So the question is, what will your future with God look like starting today? How could you spend some time maybe writing that letter, forgiving God? How's that for powerful? Maybe you have a fault line because you or someone you know is suffering from an illness. Maybe your work might be to forgive your own body for having failed you, or to forgive yourself for not taking better care, or to forgive God for this injustice. I can see a letter addressed. Dear Cancer, omit these lines because they can't be spoken from the pulpit. I did not invite you into my life. Or, for those of you who've maybe suffered heart trouble, dear heart, I know that you've been beating inside me since I was in my mother's womb. I'm sorry I did not treat you better. Where might there be pressure building up for you? Fault lines created for you interpersonally or in your relationships with your parents, your children, your siblings, your spouse, your boss, your friends. Can you commit to doing the work to soften your heart? To take a step in their direction to meet them? We live in an unfair world, on shaky and unstable ground. We have limited time on this earth and a limited amount of time to experience the beauty and the love that is also all around us. What can you do today to give up the possibility of a better past and instead begin having a better today? Our strength is in our forgiveness. May it be so.